The lady from the church asked me to pray for her husband's soul. I said, of course. When did he die? And she answered, tomorrow. No child should die alone. That's why I decided to let my son invite some friends over. Someone started having a coughing fit at my workplace. The problem is that I work alone in a morgue. Never knock on your door from the inside at dawn. The devil can knock on the outside. These macabre stories and others that can't be told on the channel, you'll see in the Cursed ebook. The link is in the comments. Buy it now. In the dim light of the early morning, the air was thick with a palpable sense of dread. As the clock struck 5 a.m., a heavy silence enveloped the city, broken only by the distant hum of engines and the occasional flutter of unseen wings. The streets, usually bustling with the energy of a new day, were now empty and foreboding. It was the kind of silence that seemed to hold its breath, waiting for something to shatter it. Jenna was well aware of the urban legends surrounding early morning Ubers. The tales were as old as the city itself, whispered among weary travelers and urban explorers alike. They spoke of drivers who vanished without a trace, of passengers who were never seen again, and of routes that led to places no one should ever visit. But Jenna had always dismissed these stories as nothing more than spooky myths until now. She had stayed out late the previous night, and now, as she waited for her ride, she couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Her phone buzzed, and a notification flashed across the screen. Your Uber is arriving. The name of the driver was unfamiliar, and the car's details seemed slightly off. A black sedan with tinted windows that looked older than it should, but with no other options, and her fatigue weighing heavily. Jenna tapped confirm. The car pulled up silently, gliding to a stop in front of her with an unnerving smoothness. The driver, a man with hollow eyes and a fixed, unsettling grin, greeted her with an oddly rehearsed politeness. Good morning. Ready to go. His voice was calm, but there was something chilling in its monotone cadence. Jenna nodded, feeling a shiver run down her spine as she climbed into the back seat. As the car moved forward, the familiar cityscape began to morph into something alien. The streets she had known were replaced by darkened alleys and shadowy corners. Jenna glanced out the window, trying to make sense of the distorted landscape. The surroundings grew increasingly unfamiliar, and the buildings seemed to lean in, as if trying to peer into the vehicle. Where are we going? Jenna asked, her voice trembling despite her efforts to remain composed. The driver's grin widened, but he didn't answer. Instead, he kept his eyes on the road, his hands gripping the steering wheel with an unnatural rigidity. The car took a turn onto a narrow, deserted road that seemed to stretch on forever. Jenna's unease deepened as the road became narrower, and the trees on either side grew thick and gnarled. It felt as though they were being swallowed by the darkness, and every mile seemed to stretch into an eternity. Excuse me, Jenna said, her voice more insistent. Nah, I think I'm on the wrong route. Can you take me back? The driver's smile never faltered. We're almost there, he replied, his voice echoing strangely as if coming from a great distance. Panic set in as Jenna's phone lost signal, and her attempts to contact anyone for help proved futile. The car continued its descent into the abyss, and the once familiar city lights were now mere pinpricks in the encroaching darkness. Suddenly the car came to a halt. Jenna's heart raced as the driver turned to face her, his eyes now reflecting an eerie glow. "This is your stop," he said, his voice devoid of emotion. Jenna looked out the window to see an old, decrepit building standing in front of her, a place she had never seen before, its windows dark and its structure decayed. "Wait, this isn't where I'm supposed to be," Jenna exclaimed, her voice rising in desperation. The driver's grin widened into a sinister, almost predatory expression. "The rules are the rules," he said cryptically. "Some journeys are meant to end here." Before Jenna could react, the driver's hand reached out and pulled a lever. The back door of the car swung open, and Jenna was thrust out onto the cold, hard ground. The car sped away, disappearing into the shadows as if it had never existed. Jenna's mind raced as she looked around, trying to make sense of her surroundings. The building loomed above her, its broken windows seeming to watch her every move. The air was heavy with an oppressive silence, and every footstep she took seemed to echo with an unnatural resonance. She tried to open the door to the building, but it was locked tight. Panic surged through her as she pounded on the door, her cries for help swallowed by the darkness. Her phone remained dead, and her attempts to call for help were in vain. The cold began to seep into her bones, and the sense of hopelessness settled over her like a shroud. As the minutes ticked by, Jenna began to hear faint whispers carried on the wind. The whispers grew louder, coalescing into a chorus of disembodied voices that seemed to mock her predicament. The voices spoke of forgotten souls, lost in the void, and Jenna felt a chill as she realized the truth of their words. Suddenly, the building's door creaked open slowly, and Jenna was met with a rush of stale, musty air. She hesitated, but knew she had no other choice. With trembling hands, she stepped inside, her footsteps echoing in the darkened hallway. The interior was a labyrinth of decaying rooms and darkened corridors. Shadows danced on the walls, and every corner seemed to harbor something just out of sight. The whispers grew louder as Jenna ventured deeper, guiding her toward an unknown destination. Eventually, Jenna reached a room at the end of the hallway, its door slightly ajar. The whispers had ceased, replaced by a heavy, oppressive silence. She pushed the door open and stepped inside, only to find a mirror standing against the wall. The reflection that stared back at her was not her own. It was a gaunt, hollow-eyed version of herself, with a face twisted into a grotesque expression of fear. Jenna's heart pounded as the reflection began to move independently, its eyes following her every motion. Suddenly, the reflection's mouth opened, and a chilling voice spoke from within the mirror. "You should have read the rules," it intoned, its voice dripping with malice. "Now you are one of us." The room began to spin, and Jenna's vision blurred as she felt herself being pulled toward the mirror. The last thing she saw before everything went dark was her own terrified face, framed by the cold, unyielding glass. And then there was nothing. The room fell silent once more, and Jenna was gone, absorbed into the mirror's depths, lost forever in the shadows of the early morning Uber. Until next time, thank you.